Coming in at number 5, we have plane crash wreckage. Discovered around the year 2000 was a wreckage site of a plane crash among the snow and ice in Alaska. It's thought that the crash happened in 1948, where around 30 people tragically lost their lives. So how did no one discover this? Well, the part of the small plane was buried beneath the snow, and the wreckage was located on a glacier on the side of a mountain in the Alaskan wilderness. So not much movement had been made, and a total of 200,000 people live in Alaska around the time of the crash. Flight 4422 of the Northwest Airlines was finally located after 50 years. Two searchers discovered the crash while on an expedition near the north side of Mount Sanford in Wrangell St. Elias National Park. The flight consisted of 6 crew members and 24 passengers, all seamen from an oil tanker company who were on their way home to New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts. Some skeletal remains were found in the wreckage along with a mummified hand and arm. Around 2010, nearly a decade after the initial finding of the crash site, identifiable fingerprints were recovered from the remains, making a positive identification of a passenger on the flight that day in 1948, making this the world's oldest known identification of a post-mortem remain using fingerprint identification. The remaining 29 bodies still await possible recovery due to the remote location and weather conditions on the mountain. Kevin McGregor, who was one of the men who discovered the crash site, stated that the discovery brought a sense of closure for the families and loved ones of those who lost their lives that day. If this case interested you, Kevin McGregor, the co-founder of the plane wreckage, published a non-fiction account of the events of Flight 4422. Coming in at number 4, we have dinosaur bones. It turns out many dinosaur bones have been found throughout the years in the frozen tundra of Antarctica. Due to extreme cold weather, many dinosaurs have been able to stay preserved for millions of years until they were able to be discovered. The first discovery was made by geologists Eduardo Oliveira and Roberto Scasso in 1986. Another discovery was made by paleontologist Rodolfo Coria and paleotechnician Juan J. Molly, who happened upon a partial skeleton of a dinosaur in 2013. This new discovery consisted of some assorted hip, limb, and spinal bones, and the men could tell it was an ornithopod dinosaur, a beaked grazing herbivore ranging in size from small to outweighing Tyrannosaurus rexes. Along with many bones found, many fossils have also been discovered in the snow and ice of Antarctica. Most famously in 2017, the Elamosaur, which was an ancient aquatic reptile that swam the seas millions of years ago alongside the dinosaurs. The animal would have weighed up to 15 tons and is now one of the most complete ancient reptile fossils ever discovered in Antarctica. These sea creatures make up a family of the plesiosaurs, which are some of the largest sea creatures in existence. These creatures look kind of similar to manatees because of their large bodies, but also had long giraffe-like necks, snake-like heads, and flippers. Many would describe these creatures looking like the Loch Ness Monster because of their look, weight, and they span nearly 40 feet. The odd thing is, Antarctica was only formed about 25 million years ago, long after the dinosaurs had gone extinct. Before it was known as Antarctica, it was part of a supercontinent called Gondwana, which was a very hot place. Wow. Global warming. Wait. Climate change. Coming in at number 3, we have Otsi the Iceman. Otsi the Iceman is considered to be the most famous natural mummy in the world. Otsi is the mummified corpse of a man who died around 3300 BC and was found on the border of Austria and Italy in September of 1991 by German tourists who were hiking the mountain in the Ötztal Alps. They had found the upper half of the body sticking out of the snow, and the corpse of the man is believed to have died after being struck by an arrow and bled to death, but this was not determined until 10 years after the discovery of the body. There was an arrowhead embedded in his left shoulder, and they had also found some of his belongings like a copper axe, 14 arrows, and a chirp-bladed knife near his body. After the discovery of the Iceman, 8 groups have visited the site, among whom were mountaineers Hans Kammerlander and Reinhold Messner. They had semi-extracted the body and came back the next day to finally free the corpse. Otzi was brought to be extensively examined, and in 2016 it was discovered that the man was around 5 feet 3 inches and weighed 110 pounds and was 45 years old at the time of his death. Along with being the most famous natural mummy found, Otzi's blood was examined by scientists, and they had discovered his blood cells were still intact and resembled a modern-day sample. Many allege that Otzi is cursed because many people connected to the discovery of his body have died under mysterious circumstances. People like co-discoverer Helmut Simon and the first examiner of the body, Konrad Spindler. To this day, some people involved in some way with Otzi have died, and many attribute this to the alleged curse. Otzi is Europe's oldest known natural mummy, and his body and belongings he was found with are displayed in the South Tyrol Museum Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano, Italy. Coming in at number 2, we have the Inca incident. The Inca incident is one of the saddest things found under ice. In 1993, 3 Inca mummies were found in Argentina near the volcan summit. These people were participating in a year-long series of sacred ceremonies that got them ready to be sacrificed. In Inca religious ideology, the one being sacrificed had to participate in the consumption of coca and alcohol in the form of chica, a fermented brew made from maize. This was done to apparently induce altered states, but many believe it was done to make the people more compliant during this process. The maiden's long braided hair helped researchers record what she ate and drank during the last 2 years of her life. This is where they could tell by her change in diet that a year prior to her death she was selected to take part and be sacrificed along with 2 other people. The people discovered were from 500 years ago, and the bodies were almost perfectly preserved from the ice. Their bodies sit in curled sleeping-like positions. Andrew Wilson, a forensic and archaeological expert at the University of Bradford, stated, "In terms of mummies that are known around the world, in my opinion, she has to be the best preserved of any of the mummies that I'm aware of. She looks almost as if she's just fallen asleep." Their remains are now on display in Salta, Argentina. And finally, at number 1, we have Yuka the woolly mammoth. Back in early 2010, in a town called Yuka, which is a small village near the Laptev Sea of Siberia, local Siberian tusk hunters had come across a mummified corpse of a 39,000-year-old woolly mammoth. The mammoth was approximately 6 to 8 years old and weighed a whopping 5 tons. The mammoth mummy was found on an overhanging ledge about 4 meters above the beach level, partially in ice and covered in snow. When she was found, the locals named her after their town, hence the name Yuka. It is believed that Yuka had most likely been attacked by lions or other predators, but there is no evidence to support that theory, so to this day no one really knows how she died or how no one had found this giant beast in the snow. Others say she may have fallen off the ledge into the water and couldn't free herself and ultimately died. Thanks to the permafrost in Siberia, Yuka could stay cold and be preserved until her discovery was made. In 2012, scientists from the local mammoth museum in Irkutsk came and assessed their findings and had stored and preserved Yuka for the next 2 years in a natural refrigerator. Other scientists from Japan are fascinated by this discovery of this mummified mammoth and had actually been able to extract flowing blood from Yuka and plan to clone her. Hwang Woo-suk, a South Korean scientist, signed a deal and he was given the right to attempt to clone Yuka. Suk produced the world's first cloned dog in 2005. Many doubt the possibility to be able to clone Yuka due to her being so old and trying to produce an identical version using such old material. In 2014, Yuka was transported to Russia and was put on display where she stays to this day and is regarded to be the best preserved woolly mammoth in the history of paleontology. Coming in at number 5, we have fish lizard graveyard. This fish lizard graveyard was discovered by researchers in Torres del Paine National Park in Chile. They had uncovered 46 almost complete skeletons of ichthyosaurs, or what we would call fish lizards. They had been discovered actually because of global warming, because they were preserved in the ice and snow and were found due to melting of the glaciers. Out of the 46 found, there consisted of 4 different species, and back in the dino days, these fast-swimming marine reptiles lived during the Mesozoic era, which was 90 to 240 million years ago. These fish lizards had torpedo-shaped bodies with vertical flippers and long snouts with sharp teeth. Their remains date back to over 100 million years ago, so they have coexisted with many of our favorite dinosaurs like the famous T-Rex. Due to the cold weather, these creatures were so well preserved and even had soft tissues and embryos. One of the largest of the group was more than 16 feet long, so these aren't just small fish. These dinosaurs fish are massive. Very few ancient reptiles have been found in South America before. Only a few remnants of rib cages and vertebrae had been found, so this was a huge win for scientists, even though to us it is a terrifying discovery. The researchers believe these creatures were involved in some sort of accident that had killed them and put them in the glacier, and then were hit by an avalanche as well. It is believed these fish were one of the first to die out in what scientists describe as global depletion of oxygen. After the discovery of this grave site, it established the Chilean glacier as one of the prime sites for early Cretaceous marine reptiles worldwide. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be swimming in the ocean with that monster underneath me, but this discovery was incredible for science, and if you're interested in trying to find some more of these scary prehistoric creatures, you will have to drive about 5 hours, hike 10 to 12 hours to camp, and then hike another 2 hours, so it is quite a trek, and it's incredible that these creatures were even found. Coming in at number 4, we have Hiker's Bones on Skeleton Lake. Located in the Himalayas, it is where many avid hikers and climbers have met their doom. The Himalayas is some of the highest peaks in all of the world, and that's why it's such a tourism spot for hikers and climbers alike. The highest peak is over 22,000 feet tall, and that is the famous Mount Everest. The Himalayas is enormous and crosses over many different countries in Asia like India, China, Nepal, Bhutan and Pakistan, and includes many lakes, glaciers and mountain ranges. It contains the third largest deposit of ice and snow in the world, after Antarctica and the Arctic. Dating back to 1922, Mount Everest is one of the most popular expeditions in all of the world for climbers. Many go to see if they can actually do it because it is the ultimate test of ability. An average of 5 climbers die each year trying to successfully climb up and then back down this treacherous mountain, and it's said to have over 200 bodies left there. This infamous skeleton lake, or as some people used to call it, Rupkund Lake, is located in India, and some of the remains date back to as far as 850 AD. You probably guess why this lake has gotten its nickname, and that's because several hundred skeletal remains have been left on this lake and in the snow surrounding the area. Little is known about these individuals, especially the ones that date back more than 1,000 years. Some have been studied and continue to be studied by scientists to determine if these people have died in one simultaneous event or during separate events. In 1942, an Indian forest official was the first person to stumble upon these 300 to 800 preserved human remains, and in the late 1950s the mysterious lake was announced to the public and has raised interest and triggered several investigations that continue to this day. After its original discovery, it is still considered one of the world's many mysteries. If you're an avid hiker or climber, I would suggest to maybe keep out of the Himalayas, because if you come to Skeleton Lake, it is very likely that you will spot many bones scattered around the area. Coming in at number 3, we have bodies of World War I soldiers. Also known as the White Wall mummies, who were found in the ice and snow in Italy. These frozen corpses were so well preserved due to being under mountains of snow, but as a result of global warming, these bodies have been popping up along the Alps due to the melting of the glaciers in the Italian Alps, and that's how these men were discovered. Among the many remains, there was also a haunting discovery of 2 bodies who were Austrian soldiers who were found on the Presena Glacier in 2012. These individuals had blonde hair, blue eyes, and bullet holes in their skulls. The many soldiers discovered in Peyo found in what's known as the White War. Italy entered World War I on the side of the Allies in 1915, and one of the most dangerous fronts became the area surrounding Peyo, where Italian and Austrian soldiers fought not only each other but also extremely cold temperatures and the constant danger of an avalanche. It is believed that in 1916 their biggest fear came true when an avalanche came down and killed around 10,000 men, which is now named the White Death. The small ski resort town of Peyo in the Italian Alps has become the center of an archaeological wonderland due to this discovery, and researchers say if global warming continues to melt these glaciers, many more discoveries of these corpses may be found. Remains have been found in the Italian Alps almost every year after the initial discovery in 2004. The most terrifying fact is that the weather conditions, harsh circumstances, and avalanche had taken more lives than the war these men had been fighting in. Coming in at number 2, we have a preserved mummy head. This is the discovery of a preserved mummy head, or now known as the Siberian Beauty. In 2017, archaeologists found mummies buried in the Zeleny Yar burial site near the Russian town of Salykark. There were 2 specific mummies discovered. It is believed that these mummies were over 900 years old and were part of an unknown medieval fishing and hunting community in the northern part of Siberia. The female mummy was also the only female in the burial ground, leading researchers to believe she was an elite member of the society. The creepiest thing about the discovery is that the only part of the woman that was preserved was her head. The researchers were baffled by the amazing preservation of her head, because you could still see she had a full set of hair and teeth, and even eyelashes being visible after so much time. A team of scientists from the Institution of the Problems of Northern Development estimate that the woman stood around 5'1", and although her body was poorly preserved, it is believed she was about 35 years old at the time of her death. Near the side of the mummy was badly preserved bones, along with bronze temple rings that had been wrapped inside reindeer skin and bits of birch bark, which were most likely used for her body bag. They believed the head was so well preserved due to the harsh weather and being surrounded by snow and ice, giving the mummy the ability to be preserved rather than decay. If you're ever going to the snowy areas of Russia, I would keep your eye out for any preserved mummies or bones, because they have been discovered constantly. And finally, in at number 1, we have a Martian meteorite. One of the biggest mysteries and conspiracy theories today is if there is life besides us on Earth, and this discovery could put fact to those claims. Antarctica was mentioned in our part 1 video, and it is considered to be one of the creepiest places for creepy things found in the snow and ice. Also, due to the harsh climate and weather of this place, it makes it possible to preserve bodies and other things very well as hiding possible findings in the mass amounts of snow and large glaciers. On December 27, 1984, a team from the Antarctica search for meteorites found a small fragment of Martian rock buried in the snow. The meteorite weighs just over 4 pounds and is estimated to have formed from molten rock over 4 billion years ago and is now known as Allen Hills 84001. This space rock is thought to be one of the oldest Martian meteorites ever found and is the only meteorite originating when Mars may have had liquid surface water. This discovery made national headlines in 1996 when scientists claimed to have found fossils of microscopic bacteria within the rock, which basically confirmed that there was and could still be life on Mars, and that statement alone is extremely creepy. Many speculate if this is still the case due to the lack of evidence, but the theory still stands today, and who knows, we could be walking among aliens, we just don't know it. This piece of history, an extremely creepy meteorite, is currently on display at the popular Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, located in Washington, D.C.
Number 5 on this list is the C-124 crash. To be exact, the incident is typically referred to as the 1952 Mount Gannett C-124 crash. It was the tragic accident of a Douglas C-124 Globemaster military transport airplane. This airplane was flying over Alaska when it crashed into Mount Gannett, killing all 52 people on board. The crash happened in some extreme Alaskan weather. The weather was so extreme and dangerous that the rescue attempts had to be postponed by 3 days, effectively killing any chance anybody had at survival if they did manage to survive the initial impact of the crash. After the weather subsided enough for search parties and rescue teams to go out looking, they were able to find some of the wreckage sticking out of the snow close to the summit of the mountain. This was only the tail section of the plane though, and they couldn't locate the rest of it. It was believed that the plane was going at full speed, couldn't see based on the horrible weather conditions, and crashed directly into the top of the mountain. This exploded the airplane and meant that debris was scattered all over the mountain. The families of those who were lost were told that they wouldn't be able to recover their loved ones' remains and that they would have to perform a funeral without the actual body. This remained the case until in 2012 when they started to find more debris. A helicopter was flying over the area when they spotted a yellow rescue raft. They checked it out and they found a bunch more of the remains of the airplane. This was roughly 14 miles away from where they thought the plane had initially crashed, so they think that it floated down a river and then froze where they found it. The remains of 17 dead were found frozen in the ice, which I can only imagine was an incredibly morbid and unsettling sight. What is potentially even more scary is that the current count of identified bodies recovered is 40, which means that there are still 12 other bodies frozen somewhere in Alaska that have yet to be found. Number 4 on this list is a reindeer carcass. Now, a reindeer doesn't sound too scary. In fact, reindeer are quite beautiful creatures that are generally loved. The reindeer that was found in the ice, though, was carrying something extremely deadly. Anthrax is defined by Google as a serious bacterial disease of sheep and cattle, causing acute and often fatal septicemia and also transmissible to humans. Anthrax is so deadly that it's even been weaponized before and used to attack humans. The reindeer that was in the ice was carrying this disease, and when it thawed out the disease that had been dormant for decades, carried on right where it left off. This happened in Siberia and has caused quite a problem for the locals in the area. There are a lot of reindeer farmers out in that area, and what happened is that the disease found its way back into the livestock. Thousands of reindeer became infected, and this eventually moved into the humans. Many people got extremely ill and some even died. The scariest part about all of this is that we never even went looking for this reindeer in the first place. It was actually the cause of global warming. The rising temperatures are what are responsible for the de-thawing process of this reindeer and the catalyst for this outbreak. That's a big problem because it's thought that in the area of Siberia there could be thousands more reindeer in the exact same situation as the carcass that started all of this. Reindeer that have died to anthrax were then frozen and have lay in the ice for decades. These are frozen, ticking time bombs just waiting to thaw out enough and have the bacteria become active again to infect other living organisms. If the people in that area aren't careful, then a massive outbreak could spread, killing potentially thousands. Number 3 on this list are the children of Llullaillaco. This is a truly horrible story, so fair warning. 3 Inca children's bodies were found in 1999 by Johann Reinhardt and his team of archaeologists. These children were found on the summit of Llullaillaco, which is a mountain on the Argentinian and Chilean border. They were found in a box that was buried underground at the summit of the mountain, and their bodies were basically perfectly preserved. It's believed that this preservation is due to the cold temperatures at the summit summit of this mountain. Now it's thought that these children died in the form of a sacrifice. The Inca civilization reached its height in 1530 and then slowly started to decline from the attacks of the Spaniards. The Inca civilization believed heavily in sacrificial rituals as a means of praising their gods. They would often perform sacrifices to commemorate important events or when they were going through harsh times to appease these gods. These sacrifices weren't limited to just adults though. Children were also used when worshipping the gods. Throughout the years, people have found other sacrificial sites and bodies that are presumed to be the work of the Incas. However, no bodies are quite as well preserved as the 3 children found in 1999. Honestly, really sad and scary stuff. Number 2 on this list is White Friday. White Friday was an event that transpired during the First World War on the Italian front. It happened on December 13th in 1916, which is actually surprisingly a Wednesday, but they decided to call it White Friday anyways. What it was a collection of disastrous avalanches that claimed the lives of thousands of soldiers. These avalanches happened all over the front, with the largest one striking the Austro-Hungarian barracks on Mount Marmolanda. That singular avalanche is said to have claimed the lives of 270 soldiers, burying them under meters of snow in the Alps. Due to the nature of these avalanches and just how widespread they were, bodies are still being discovered to this day. With over 2,000 people reported dying and being spread out all over the Alps, it's no wonder that these soldiers are still popping up. It is extremely eerie to find a dead body preserved in ice, but I think it makes it even worse when those bodies are from such a horrible time like World War I. If you happen to be traversing the Alps in the area that these avalanches took place, then for starters, be careful of avalanches, but also keep your eyes out for the remains of World War I soldiers. It's not extremely unlikely to stumble upon them. Number 1 on this list is the Iceman. The Iceman is, as you'd expect, a man. A Stone Age warrior that we've named Otsi. This man was found frozen in the Italian Alps near Austria in 1991. The discovery got worldwide attention when it was first released. This man was estimated to have been frozen 5,300 years ago, so it was a very groundbreaking find when it happened. Very quickly though, rumors of a curse started to circulate. People started to fear that the Iceman was actually angry to have been woken from his 53-century slumber and would have preferred to remain undisturbed in the ice. These rumors didn't just come out of thin air though, they all started with a death. Helmut Simon, the German tourist who discovered the Iceman to begin with, fell to his death whilst he was climbing near the discovery spot due to an avalanche. Then, as his funeral was taking place, Dieter Warneck, the head of the rescue team, died of a heart attack. A few months later, the archaeologist who first inspected the Iceman died as well. Then it was the head of the forensic team who died in a car crash when he was on his way to make a lecture about the Iceman. Then a mountaineer who played a critical role in taking the body out of its frozen location died in another avalanche. Then the journalist who was the one filming the extraction process of the Iceman died as well. And finally, a 7th person, a scientist who was associated with the studies performed on the Iceman, died to natural causes. Now all of these deaths happened within a year of the Iceman's discovery, and all of these people who died were crucial in the Iceman being found in the first place. Some people have chalked it up to a simple coincidence, but a lot of people believe that this ancient man is cursed, that his body and soul wanted to remain in that ice, and the second that it was taken out, the curse was released on those close enough to be affected.
Number 5. Yuki-onna. Coming in first on our list is Yuki-onna, a deadly monster. Her name translates to Snow Woman, which is pretty fitting for a list about ice creatures. She goes by a few names, however, depending on who's telling the story. Sometimes it's swapped out for Yuki-onba, translating to Snow Grandma, or Yukinba, Snow Hag, depending on how nice you're feeling about her. She's a beautiful alabaster woman with pale, pale skin, and is the restless spirit of a woman who perished tragically in the snow and is unable to find any peace and wanders the wilds, luring men away to their doom, freezing, or going around causing blizzards and snowstorms to trap clueless travelers. Now there are several local variants on the story of Yuki-onna all across Japan, as it's an ancient myth dating all the way back to the 14th century. Most variants contain pretty similar elements. She's a tall, slender, gorgeous woman who's also completely ruthless. Some variations of her legend depict her as a wandering mother, carrying a child in her arms, and anyone who tries to endanger her child or take her child from her face her wrath. Most of these stories depict her as being cold in every sense of the word, feeling no remorse for her victims. Her reasons for hunting vary. Sometimes she does it to lure men away and seduces them with freezing kisses. Some say she does it just because. But you know what? I think I could fix her. She's known to spare people on occasion, so she's got some heart beating inside that cold, cold exterior. I'm sure if we got to know each other, I could melt her heart just a little bit. Hey, like the scares? Want to hear more about more monsters every day? Well, then you're at the right place. Just subscribe to Top 5 Scary and we'll keep it up for you. Number 4, Barbagazi. I'm including these guys because while researching for this video, I found out about them for the first time and immediately became obsessed with these little goofs. They're not super scary, but this is the kind of thing that I think the world will be a lot better for if we all know about. The Barbagazi is a French variant of a gnome, a squat little humanoid with giant feet, covered in white hair and long pointed ears, and an even longer white beard frozen with clumps of ice and icicles, explaining their name. Barbagazi is a broken telephone translation of the French words barbe and glacé, translating to frozen beards. So they're frosty little gnomes, they're like little elves. They don't make any toys, but they do like to play, and they use their gigantic hobbit-like feet to ski down mountains. They surf avalanches. These guys rule. These guys are just adorable little adrenaline-chasing snow gnomes. Snomes? As a nice change of pace from the usual monsters and the rest of this list, the Barbagazi really just want to chill, pun extremely intended. They help shepherds find their flocks, they help lost travelers find their way home, and honestly they'd probably help you move if you asked. These adorable big feet live in tunnels deep beneath the mountains, in vast networks of interconnected caves and secluded villages where they hibernate for years when the climate doesn't suit them. They live up in the Alps on the border of Switzerland and France, which is maybe where their good nature comes from. That famed Swiss neutrality means they're not going around dooming anybody the way Yuki-onna is. There's not too much folklore around these guys, and really everything I've just said to you is about everything I could find on them personally, but I absolutely loved the concept of the skiing snow gnomes, so here they are. I hope you like them even a quarter as much as I did. Number 3, Ittikarq. Okay, we've had enough pleasant, cute little myths, so let's get back to the scary ones. The Ittikarq, translating to shapeshifter, is a doomed creature born out of a cruel fate. Born out of a human being who wandered too far out into the cold and found themselves caught between the worlds of life and death, trapped to forever wander between the line. It's a shapeshifter that can take any form that it pleases, but it's never able to mask its signature trademark, its glowing, sinister red eyes. When it's in its most natural form, it does resemble a human, although a bit of a twisted one, as its eyes are contorted sideways, as well as its mouth, disfigured past the point of recognition of a regular mouth. It's said that you can only ever gaze upon an Ittikarq from out the corner of your eye, for if you look at them directly, it'll disappear from your vision, as if it was never really there. It's said that they target out travelers specifically, luring lost, wayward souls to try to convert the living into joining them in their land of the undead. And as well, they prey on lost children secluded from their families to drag them away and steal them. It's best to steer completely clear out of any territory Ittikarq are said to inhabit, as no matter how well versed you are with your environments and your tracking ability, once you've made yourself exposed to the presence of an Ittikarq, you're bound to become ensnared in its trap eventually and lose your way. That's why they build the Nookshuks to help the children find their way back home if they're able to convince an Ittikarq to let them go. Now it's said if you do encounter one, and if you survive, you will barely be able to remember what happened, with all of it seeming like a fleeting, distant dream. Number 2, Yeti. Now you had to guess that if we were going to do a list of icy creatures, that the abominable snowman would be making a snow-stopping appearance. Snow-stopping? Like show-stopping? Yeah, you kind of get it, you know what I mean. Yetis are like the snow monster. Did you know Yeti actually means snowman in Nepalese? Now don't say you don't learn anything from any of these videos. The creature is a tall, bipedal, ape-like creature, like a winterized variant of Bigfoot, said to roam the Himalayas. Much like the elusive Sasquatch, there have been many numerous reported sightings over the years, although it could be possible that a lot of these are just people seeing bears and it's kind of snowy out and it's hard to tell what's going on. But there could also be an inconspicuous ape-like species lurking around in the mountains, just out of reach of human eyes. I'm willing to hear all options on this. It's one of the oldest myths to mountain-dwelling peoples, and there are countless local variations and spins on the creature and its fables. It's actually fascinating. I had no idea how many variants of Yetis there are across so many different cultures. It appears across multiple cultures, a recurring element in several mythologies. Yeti is hardly the only name it goes by. A couple other Tibetan names for this creature include Mish, which means man-bear, Migo, translating to wild man, and Bunmanshi, which is Nepali for jungle man. It goes without saying that abominable snowman is not the indigenous name for it, but rather a name dubbed to it by British officers in the 1920s who were fascinated by stories of the creature. It's a bit of a misnomer because most cultures actually view the Yeti as a bit more of a benevolent being than any of those names might suggest, with some cultures viewing them as descendants of gods or divine beings, or see them as an intelligent species that just wants to be left alone and respected, driven to near extinction from hunters. And I can respect that. Let these beautiful creatures just vibe out there. And finally, at our number one spot is my personal favorite northern winter cryptid, sometimes called the Wendigo, but most commonly known as the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a vengeful, malevolent spirit, originating from plains, Great Lakes, and First Nations people based around the east coast of Canada. Is that why I included the Wendigo up at number one? Very possibly. Like pretty much all mythological creatures, there's no set truth or one story about the Wendigo, and countless local variations exist on it. Depictions of Wendigos range from a humanoid, emaciated, nasty-looking creature, a bit like me, although somewhere down the line, it became very popular to depict the Wendigo as a bipedal monster with a deer's skull in place of a head. In some Ojibwe and Cree lore, the Wendigo is described as being massive, towering over humans, although this trait seems to be unique to those stories. It's said that Wendigos maintain their faculties from when they were human, able to communicate, speak, to be able to better lure prey or taunt and threaten their targets. Common to all depictions of the Wendigo, though, is that it's a malevolent, vengeful spirit which takes over humans. It's sometimes thought to be the embodiment of human greed and gluttony, and invokes an insatiable lust for hunger, and oftentimes a devouring desire for human flesh. Some variants of the Wendigo myth say that a starving human who succumbs to their darkest desires and consumes human flesh will find themselves transforming into a Wendigo. Other times it's said merely being around the presence of one will slowly cause you to turn. It's thought that Wendigo myths originate as a means to encourage cooperation among people, for if you're overcome by your own greed or foolishly venture off by yourself, you'll descend and turn into one of these vicious creatures and only end up serving damage to your community. Now, for whatever reason, we are fascinated as a culture by Wendigos. We just love these guys. They pop up all the time. There's a Marvel character named Wendigo based off the myth who I'm sure is getting a 10-episode Disney Plus series as I speak. Wendigos appear as the central antagonist of the video game Until Dawn, appearing as pale, emaciated creatures born out of flesh consumption and living in the mountains. And recently, the 2021 horror film Antler centered around a Wendigo as its main antagonist. We seem to always be hungry for more Wendigo content. Nothing ironic about that.